Are you sheltering in place, isolated, feeling alone? Well, then you're just like us.
Hit me.
From Studio P in Sausalito, the home of the quarantined hit, it's time for... Succotash Shut-In, the soundcast stimulus package featuring snippets from comedy...
Soundcasts.
And now, here's your host for this episode, Marc Hershon.
Thank you, Bill Haywatt, and season's greetings, Succotashians. I'm your every other weekly co-host, Marc Hershon, and I know it's a little early to be making with the Christmas cheer, but this is likely the last time I'll be speaking to you until after Christmas and New Year's. My fellow co-host Tyson Saner and I will be taking a little holiday break after next week, so I figured I'd better make with the Yuletide wishes while I can. Speaking of Mr. Saner, if you missed his most recent installment, that would be Succotash Shut-In episode 232, featuring clips from comedy soundcasts Pancake presents the Monday afternoon movie, Puppetry Shop Talk, and Good For You with Whitney Cummings. It's not too late to enjoy that episode. It's available on our home site at succotashshow.com, as well as Google and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart Radio, Stitcher, Laughable, and even on YouTube. Normally, I'd haul in a Santa's sack full of seasonal snippets for you on a show this close to Xmas, but I am unwrapping something different for you. If our normal fare is like a Whitman sampler of soundcasts, then this is more like a Harry and David's delivery. It's fresh chat. So fresh that, until I recorded this episode's conversation with our guest just last week, she and I had never met or even spoken before, even though we've been working together for the past couple of years. How can that be, you say? Well, Becca James is my guest today. She's a freelance writer who's got a major focus on soundcasts, or podcasts, as she still refers to them, and I will be too during our interview, but just to make her feel comfortable, you understand. She and I are fellow soundcast reviewers for This Week in Comedy Podcasts, there's that word again, over on vulture.com. She does a lot more written coverage than I, and she writes about comedy and music and a variety of other subjects. She was a writer, then editor at the AV Club a while back, and we are going to cover how she got into it, what she likes about the gig, and we'll talk about why she's never seriously considered starting up her own soundcast. And we will get to that convo in just a moment. Today's episode of Succotash Shut-In, the Soundcast Stimulus Package, is brought to you by our long-running sponsors Henderson Pants and TrumpPoetry.com. So, before we dive in with Becca James, here's a message from Henderson's for their seasonally appropriate new jingle drawers.
Hello, friends, and happy holidays from Henderson's Pants. Just in time for this special time of year, Henderson's is pleased to introduce our Jingle Drawers. These special edition holiday pants are secular in nature, which means you can wear them whether you're gathered around the menorah for Hanukkah, the tree for Christmas, or the Kinnora for Kwanzaa. Available in bright, vibrant holiday colors like red, green, blue, and yellow, Jingle Drawers are not just festive looking, but they're durable too, as they are made from 100% reindeer hide, which means you'll be trotting out into the living room and pissing off your relatives in Henderson's Jingle Pants for Yuletides to come. Jingle Drawers also come festooned with 8 large pockets, in addition to the expected 4 that come standard on most trousers. So as you visit the homes and holiday parties of family and friends, feel free to fill those pockets up, not just with gifts that they give you, but helpings of food from the table to snack on later when you're alone, sobbing by yourself in the darkness. Don't worry about getting too depressed, though, because it's hard to be glum when you're wearing your Henderson's Jingle Drawers. How could it not be? They're covered in handcrafted jingle bells, which peal with that joyous holiday sound with every step you take. Not only that, when you do receive those holiday party invitations, whether it's in someone's home or your office Christmas party, you can finally say with confidence, "I'll be there," with bells on. Originally designed for elves at the North Pole, street corner Santas, and the ghost of Christmas yet to come, Henderson's Jingle Drawers are available wherever Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the day after Christmas sales happen. That's Henderson's, makers of fine kilts and lederhosen since 1897. And now let's get back to Succotash.
I'd like to welcome Becca James to Succotash Shut-In, one of my fellow reviewers for This Week in Comedy podcasts on vulture.com. And this is a landmark moment because this is the first time we've ever laid eyes on each other.
This is true.
Oh, welcome to Succotash.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I think we've been working on this column together for, has it been 3 or 4 years at this point? Maybe longer? Is that possible?
You know, it's funny. I thought it was just coming up on 2 years, but maybe I'm wrong.
Is it just 2 years? Maybe it is. I've been working on it a long time.
Okay.
I was hired by Jesse David Fox, who
gotcha.
Still is at Vulture, but he was the editor at splitsider.com, which is where this column started. And he hired, just out of the blue, sent me an email because I was doing this show that features clips of comedy podcasts, and said, "Hey, are you any interest in doing some reviews? Have you ever written before?" And I said, "Yeah, yes to both." And at first, I don't think they even paid us at first. It was just for nothing.
Oh boy, yeah. I definitely came on when there was payment involved.
So let's find out a little bit about you, Becca. You where do you live?
I live in Astoria, Queens right now.
Okay. And how's COVID treating you?
Yeah, I was going to say I haven't left my apartment, honestly, since, March. I mean, it's pretty locked down here.
Wow.
So I do just the, essential necessity type of stuff.
Like go to the
get
store?
Groceries. Yeah, walk around the block, go to the park maybe.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. It's definitely, I don't know if you saw there's like IKEA boxes behind me because it's just been a time to nest, a time to build new furniture.
Yeah, that's, it's all happening. That's, so you're improving your nest.
Yes.
As it goes.
I had been living in Greenpoint and then just a few months before? It felt that way before the pandemic had moved. And so, yeah, as good a time as any to.
Now, do you wish you were back there when this happened, or are you happier where you are now?
Honestly, happier where I am now.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So I'm glad that worked out. I live here with my husband, and we went from having 1, 2, 3 roommates to living by ourselves. So.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Boy, living with roommates during this time is tough because I work with some folks in my regular day job that, they've got 3 or 4 roommates and they're in an apartment and it's just like crazy.
There's no way it would have ruined friendships, I'm sure.
Yeah. So how did you get started doing the podcast reviews in the first place? How did they reach out to you, or did you approach the website?
I sent Meg an email, Meg Wright, who's our editor right now, as you know, because I had been working for Podmas, which is the AV Club's podcast review column, since 2013.
Okay.
And there was a stretch in there for 4 years where I was the editor of that column. And then I left the AV Club to do freelance work. So I kept writing for the column, and then just felt like time to branch out a little.
How was the AV Club to work with? I mean, they're such a major sort of force in the kind of voice of reviews and that sort of thing, and have been for a while.
That was great. That was my first journalism job after college. I'd gotten hired as a copy editor and then worked my way up to editorial coordinator. And I inherited Podmas almost as soon as I got there, honestly. Kyle Ryan had started it and needed help going through and editing because the website, in terms of the back end, was just a mess in those days. We were still just compiling stuff in a Word document and giving it to one person to put in the CMS. And Podmas was pretty lengthy. And so he needed an extra hand. And then I kind of took over at some point. And when I first got it, it was episodic coverage of the same shows every single week. I wish I could remember like the number of shows it was, but it was like Doug Loves Movies, just like classic comedy podcasts. And it would either be in the best, the rest. I guess that was it. It was the best or the rest. So if it was the best, it was a little longer write-up. If it was the rest, it was shorter. And then there was usually like a spotlight on any podcast you wanted. So when I officially had it and it was mine to do whatever I wanted with, I switched it up and just did like the 10 best episodes of the week. I thought that made more sense. Podcasts aren't necessarily like, especially comedy podcasts, there's not like a through line all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know why we were covering them episodically. And it also just helped because it cut the cost of the column, which then meant we could pay the freelancers more because it was almost entirely written by freelancers.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be weird to just be writing about the same podcast every week.
That's so odd. Yeah, and everyone, and it wasn't like there was a mix with the writers. It was just like you had your beat. So if you were the person that listened to whatever, you made it weird every single week. That was your thing.
That's funny. When I started Succotash, the very first episode I did, they were all kind of friends of mine because I've been in comedy for a long time. And so I emailed them and said, hey, I'm going to do this clip show. And is it okay? And everyone said yes. And they said, it was like, why would I even object to you playing clips of my show to publicize it? And so I just said, well, I'm not going to ask anymore. So, and it was going fine for like a year. And then I finally got this not even an irate email. It was a direct message on Twitter from Doug Benson, and said, who gave you permission to clip my show? Was it one of my producers? And I wrote him back and I said, well, it's just a 4-minute clip of one of your shows. He says, well, my stuff is long form and it doesn't work just to hear a clip. It's all out of context. And I said, oh, what would you like me to do? He says, well, take my clip off your show. I said, okay. So I went back in and edited that particular episode and just never clipped him again. And then a couple of years later, I went to the first podcast convention in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Podcast Festival. And somebody introduced me to him. I'd never met him in person. They go, oh, you do that Succotash show? I said, yeah. Why don't you ever have me on that show? So I told him the story. He goes, oh, I didn't realize, man. Yeah, no, you can clip it. It's okay. It's cool. But that's the only time anybody ever complained about it. It was just like, but even doing
funny because the only person who ever sent me Twitter DMs when I was writing or editing Podmath was Doug Benson, and they were never friendly messages.
Isn't that funny? Wow.
Or just irritating.
It was the same thing for me doing this show because people would, I made a lot of friends doing this show because I would feature fairly obscure podcasts at the time. I mean, I started doing this in 2011 and there were just small shows and some of them many of them have gone by the wayside, but they would start going, well, hey, when are you going to play a clip from my show again? I said, do you realize even at this stage of the game, I said, you know how big podcasting is in terms of the number of shows? He says, I don't know that I'll ever get back around to clipping your show because, the point of my show is to like let people know what's out there.
Right.
And
that
I do
kind of with Podmath too, the like reinvention of it was there's so many podcasts. Why would we just cover the same, whatever, like 10 every week? Yeah,
no, it's crazy. So when you were going to journalism or taking journalism, where were you going to school?
I went to school at Columbia College, Chicago.
Okay.
So that's kind of the AV Club connection there, both based in Chicago.
And at the time, was reviewing podcasts something that you were sort of aiming at as a journalistic ideal?
Oh my gosh, not at all. It's so funny to think about. Even when I started working on Podmath, I was listening to Kevin Smith and Scott Mosier's Smodcast, and then like Sound Opinions, which is more like it's a public radio show that's like whatever branched into podcasting, I guess, because of the format. But that was really it. Wow.
Okay. And so how did you find this opportunity?
Just being at the AV Club, they needed someone to do it, and I guess, yeah, That was really it. They had asked. I was editing it, and it just made sense. I don't know. It'd feel like really weird to edit that column and have no knowledge of any of the shows. So I just dove in.
Okay. And let me ask you this during the pandemic, by the way, because I've got sort of apocryphal information about how podcasts are doing, because they just keep piling them in. We just keep getting more and more every week. But other than having to listen to them to review, are you listening to podcasts more now or less now before the pandemic set in?
Probably less. It just recently amped up again, but I would say I was a big commuter listener. And so when that went away, it's not as, I guess, normal for me to just throw them on at home in the same way.
It's not like the old picture of the people in the 30s sitting around the radio with the family.
Yeah, I haven't done that as much. So maybe a little less.
Yeah, because back in April, there was a figure I saw, and I can't remember where I'd seen this, but it was something like a drop in 8% at the time in podcast listenership. And I haven't seen anything since. I'd just be curious to see, because there are, the commuters, the people exercising in gyms, all of that, even sitting in an office where you're trying to drown out office workers around you listening to it, right? So you are at home, you're with family members or what have you. And so the idea of putting in earbuds seems a little weird, right? I mean, as much as you would do it in the office.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When I used to sit in an office back in the day, I had headphones on for the entire 8 hours if there wasn't a meeting, whereas I do not do that at home.
Yeah. So the idea that, listenership is ramping up, well, it seems odd to me. And like I said, at the same time, we're seeing just this massive influx of new podcasts. It seems like every week somebody new has stuff coming out, and there's new networks popping up, and networks are being absorbed by bigger networks.
Yeah, for a lot of money too.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I think with me, it was just a cycle. I fell off, and then it's you miss it and you realize you're not going to be on the train again anytime soon. So I have put some podcasts on at home more often. That, and I watched The Crown for the first time. Are you a Crown fan?
Yep. Watched The Crown. Just finished the most recent season.
So I didn't watch season 1, 2, or 3. Just dived right in on season 4. I was largely unfamiliar with anything going on. It wrecked me. I wasn't,
Really?
It's such a sad, everything is so sad. But then speaking of podcasts, the You're Wrong About has 4 really good Princess Diana episodes. So I had those on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's an interesting, I think that's an interesting thing people have found, is there's interesting sort of companion shows to a bit of a fan of Office Ladies.
Oh, yeah.
From The Office. And they do a great job of sort of, going through each episode and having guests on who are in the shows, or writers on the shows, or the director from the show. And now it's become very common, of course. There's all sorts of TV shows that now have these companion pieces, and it's all because of the pandemic. People are going back and they're going, oh, I can watch The Office now. I've never sat down and watched all of them. Or they were too young when it was out. Scrubs is doing the same thing. They've got this companion piece, which is just really interesting. So that's a whole nother flavor of podcast that's actually sprung up since I started doing mine. They never existed. There was no companion piece. I think the first one that I remember with any real regularity was, it was the X-Files files.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say that. And I don't know how early Gilmore Guys came out, but Gilmore Guys was a big one for me.
Yeah. That was one that was an early one as well. But that's interesting. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Chicago or New York?
I grew up in northwestern Wisconsin.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
If you can hear my accent or not, but in a small town called Lake Nebagaman. Okay. What can I tell you about Lake Nebagaman? Andy Cohen of Bravo and Real Housewives franchise fame once went to summer camp there. That's
wow.
all I got.
That's the claim to fame.
Yes, they have a boys' camp on the lake.
Oh, okay.
He has gone there.
Okay. So it's, and Wisconsin is close to Chicago. So was that just sort of the natural migration?
I'm away at the tip top, so I'm like right at the border of
Oh,
Duluth, Minnesota, and Superior, Wisconsin. So I'm like what 8-9 hour drive to
oh,
Chicago.
oh, okay.
I ended up there because my first year of college, I went to the University of Minnesota Duluth, which is like 45 minutes away from my home, and I thought I'll do generals. Like, what? It's freshman year. I'll be close to home. That'll be fine. And I kept telling myself I would not go into journalism because there's no money in journalism. So I was like weirdly enrolled in the business school, but again, that didn't matter. I was taking general courses. And I don't know if I lasted even like a week before I was writing for the school paper. And then I was just like, I need to transfer somewhere. This is bananas. And so then, yeah, I just like, it's so odd to think. I really don't have a clear memory of how Columbia College landed on my radar.
Hmm.
And I had only ever been to Chicago once in my life.
Oh, really?
Prior to, yeah, but I was just like, this seems like a great idea. And I went to an open house and I thought, oh yeah, this is a perfect idea. And then I applied and ended up going.
So parents in support of the non-money making journalism idea?
I guess, yeah. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. So I think it was just kind of like, you're getting a degree. Good for you. Best of luck.
And what is it about journalism that has sort of magnetically drawn you to it?
I have no idea because I do not enjoy writing.
Really?
I'm convinced that I'm not necessarily good at it, but maybe that's not me judging the end result. It's just like the process of it. I don't have like a strong, comforting process. I feel like so not that. I just had a lot of editing experience. It was like we had the opportunity to join the high school newspaper, like your sophomore year of high school. And I don't know, it was just clear at that point that I was more interested in like the copy editing aspect of it or shaping stories. And so that's kind of the track I took.
Okay.
In high school and then in college too, I was like an editorial assistant for our alumni magazine and editor-in-chief for our student magazine. I've just usually been more on that side. So in that respect, I like helping people get their stories out and stuff like that. I like being in a supportive role.
Okay. Are there any sort of journalistic icons that you've sort of found as you've been making your way through, like when you first started, or things that sort of inspired you in terms of, people that were doing either reporting work or editing work or anything like that?
I chuckled because I should like explain how isolated my hometown is a little more or something. I mean, when I say it's small, it's small. I think if you like Wikipedia, the population is 1,000, but that's kind of a generous take because I believe that would include like homes on the actual lake that people don't live in year round. My high school was like a collection of 8 towns to get enough kids there because this is rural Wisconsin, but I still graduated with a class of like 84.
Wow.
So I wasn't like, what was I reading when the internet, like, wasn't what it is today. So I was reading like, local newspapers. And I remember I really liked this guy, Jim Heffernan, and he just wrote like a slice of life column every week. And I think about it now and it's fine. Like but it's just it was people like that where I was like, oh, okay. Not like when, like these big, huge marquee names in journalism. It was just.
Did you ever cross paths with Jim?
Oh, I sure did. My freshman year of college, he was doing a book signing because they had like collected his columns, and I still have that book. And it's so funny to think about how nervous I was to get that book signed. But yeah, he was doing a book signing in Canal Park in Duluth, Minnesota, and I was like outside the bookstore being like, you gotta go in. And then I probably said 2 words to him. Like he would have gladly talked to me, but I was just like, yes, thank you, sir. Goodbye.
That's funny.
So
That's
yeah,
funny.
I still have that too. Cooler Near the Lake is the name of it, if anybody wants to read it.
What was it?
Cooler Near the Lake.
Cooler Near the Lake. Interesting.
Oh.
Interesting. Yeah, those columns are interesting. There's I do a weekly editorial cartoon for this weekly paper down in Half Moon Bay, which is like 30 miles south of San Francisco. And there's a guy who's been doing a column there for as long as I've been doing my cartoon, who I have met occasionally at various functions the newspaper does. But it's the same thing. He does this slice of life thing. It's all about kind of living in Half Moon Bay. And it's, called Neep Tide or something. And it's just like, and it's a mildly humorous column.
That's so funny. That's exactly what this was like. And I think, it helps with observation for sure, just in terms of writing, like learning to observe things around you.
Yeah.
It's very, it's like scene study and whatnot. But
let's kind of jump back into podcasting for a second. In terms of what sort of trends have you seen in terms of what sort of shows are like back when you first started having a consciousness of the medium and where they are now?
They've always seemed so comedy heavy, but that's something that, like, if someone said, well, statistically you're wrong, I'd be like, oh, okay, checks out. So I don't know necessarily, but then I think obviously, there were those obvious waves where like Serial came out, and so there was a lot more true crime. I've seen a lot more narrative podcasts, kind of, I don't necessarily, this term that's been thrown around, but insequential quest ones, where it's just kind of like, here's a mystery of sorts, and like, we'll work on this. So I've seen things going that way.
Like the sort of In Search of Richard Simmons kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely like that. Or even, the other one they just did, I haven't listened to yet, but it sounds great. Wind of Change.
Yeah, that's an interesting, I'm about halfway through that. And I just, because of all the other podcasts we have to listen to for the column, I just kind of keep putting things aside until I have time to listen to them. But I'm
so excited to listen to that one. But the same thing, I realized, like, I'm not going to cover this for This Week in Comedy podcast, and I don't have any other ideas for it right now, so I'm kind of holding off to like enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. Comedy wise, it's interesting because I did this pilot for a comedy narrative podcast, and had almost got it set up at where was it? It was, gosh, I can't remember the company now. One of the places in LA, and I met with the CEO, and he was all excited. And then, I have an actual showbiz lawyer, and they sent a contract through they were going to produce the show. They were going to develop it. I didn't have to put any money into it or anything once I'd done the pilot. And she calls me up and she goes, "This contract's a mess. What?" Can you mark it up? And she goes, yeah, I'll mark it up and send it back to them. And she sent it to me, and it was just gobbledygook. Just the whole contract it was like all kind of pieced together from other things. And it was like, you're going to get screwed if you sign this thing. And then they never contacted her or me ever again. It was just like, they got the contract back with all these notes and just chose not to respond. But it was interesting going through the process because one of the places I'd taken it to, it was like an ensemble cast. And they said, well, this isn't working right now. I said, what do you mean? Well, comedically, it's not working in podcasting. You need to have a central character that the story is about. And then the ensemble can be around that character. I'm going, kind of, okay. And I completely did not. I've done so much work in Hollywood. It was like, this is just somebody else's BS about how they're interpreting what's going on.
Right. I was like, I don't necessarily agree with that. I also find that comedy podcasts I prefer, and probably have preferred now for the past couple of years, are either like very tightly run. Like if you're doing the interview thing, they're like a tightly run ship, or I just prefer like absurd, short, funny things that, by no means require like a central character to take you through.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of funny because a friend of mine who I've had on the show a lot is Dana Carvey, and he's currently trying to get a podcast going that one of his sons is helping him produce. And I helped him get a podcast going like 3 years ago, and that didn't work. And not that he ever tried it. We did a pilot that never went anywhere. He just said, I don't like this one. But it's interesting because he does a lot of great short form stuff that hopefully the listeners will get a chance to discover. That's beyond just his stand-up, which is really interesting. He does these really funny characters and bizarre situations, and he's kind of like a one-man improv group, which is fascinating to watch in process. And it's something I don't really think I've heard out there too much. I mean, you have the people that kind of, can kind of speak extemporaneously, like a Greg Proops or a Bill Burr, and they can talk for an hour. But this is different. This is like going in and out of characters, but doing it really just off the cuff. And it's fascinating. So I'm hoping he eventually gets his formula together.
I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I think probably just because the format in that specific way, like two comedy podcasts, has been around so long that stuff like what you just explained is refreshing.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's like a change of pace.
Yeah, it's like when I started this show, the bulk of the comedy shows that were out there were some guys in a basement that thought they were really funny.
Okay, but like Smodcast is really funny.
Well, yeah, but
I haven't listened in so long. I don't know if that's true, but back when I listened to it, I loved it.
Yeah, and which was great. But these were guys that would listen to Smodcast and then want to do their own version of it. And it was, three guys in Indiana in a basement. And there'd be like 4 episodes, and then you never heard from the show again. And that was early podcast. That was like the second wave of podcasting, really, because I mean, Ricky Gervais and some of these other people started them in like 2005 or 6.
Yeah.
And then it dipped, and it started coming back around the time I started doing my show, like 2010, 11, 12, that sort of thing. And it's just been gaining strength ever since.
It was funny. I don't know if you saw the article that I wrote for Vulture, because I can't remember when it came out, but that was just like a humorous timeline of kind of not necessarily even podcasts, but headlines about podcasts.
Oh, I did see that.
Yeah. And I just remembered it because Ricky was one of the possible pod fathers. It was like every other week or month or whatever for like 10 years. It was like, so-and-so is the pod father.
Oh yeah. I've gotten that title from some of my more faithful, low-level podcasters. But it is fascinating. And I mean, have you ever dabbled with the idea of doing your own podcast?
Absolutely not. Like, thanks so much for having me on, but I think this is the 3rd time I've been on a podcast, and I'm worried, just worried.
Worried about what? What are you worried about?
A lot of like weird stuff goes on being on a podcast when you listen to them so often. Like I was on my friend's once to talk about movies, and that he hosts with his wife. And so I'm so used to listening to it that when they started talking, I disengaged as a person in the conversation. So I wasn't responding unless I was being asked direct questions, because I was just like, your brain just gets in that mode of, oh, I'm listening to this podcast.
Oh, that's funny.
So I guess being like not the best guest is what I worry about.
I have a formula, and this is mostly for celebrities, but I believe that if a celebrity does between 6 and 9 guest shots on various podcasts, they will then start their own.
Oh, that's so funny.
It's funny now with these proliferations of networks, the people that will do like Conan O'Brien, and Whitney Cummings and things like that. They'll do a couple of those, and then before you know it, especially with the pandemic, everybody's been jumping into it. But even before then, it was just like, hey, this is easy and kind of fun, and I can wear my sweatpants.
See, that makes sense though, because they're performers at heart. So they're like,
yes.
Oh, this is another like medium I can get into.
Yeah.
Whereas again, I like hanging out in the background more so. I get like ideas for a podcast, but so does everyone else. And in no world would I want to be the one whose voice is a part of it.
Interesting. That's very interesting. And let's just sort of as we sort of come to the end of our little time here. I'd just be curious to see. So there's people that, we get these emails all the time from people at the column who desperately want to be reviewed. What in those letters do you respond to? Because we don't get assigned the shows that we do for This Week in Comedy Podcast. I mean, sometimes Meg will suggest some things that, came in over the transom, or a friend of hers said, hey, I've got this show, but we're kind of given complete free reign to review whatever shows we want to do. And we have this weird open email system where anybody can email the column, including just, fishermen from around the world trying to get my favorite ones. Now I'm getting off on my own tangent here, but the ones that come in that purportedly are from Vulture.
Oh, all the time. And they're always telling us that we've been fired.
Either we've been fired or we have a bonus coming.
I wish I'd get the bonus ones, even though it's not real. I feel like I'm always getting the ones about my termination.
So for some reason, they have no way to stop these weird viral emails from coming in. But we do get these genuine emails from podcasters all the time. Suggesting the ones that come in and say, hey, I've been listening to this show. I think you'll find it really funny. And you can tell it's from somebody who's related to the show. Right. And then we get just hardcore, hey, here's my show. I'm doing it with some friends and blah, blah, blah. What in those letters, if anything, has ever sort of prompted you to go have a listen?
Gosh, this is one of those things where it might be easier to talk about what doesn't. I know you're aware of the like, how do you even explain this? But, when we get like 10 people that are all, they think casually recommending the same podcast, like they're really conversational and they're just like, hey, if you haven't listened to so-and-so, give it a shot. But it's clearly like an orchestrated.
Yeah, because they all come in within 3 days of each other, and there's like 15 of them.
That's just wild to me. I don't know why they think that'll work. And I don't know what it is about them that almost ensures the opposite, but just like, stop doing that. That's unnecessary. And then honestly, it's just like, I've had friends ask me about this and what they should do, because I'm pretty open to listening to any podcast. It doesn't have to be, I know the focus here would be comedy podcasts, but it's like, just send an email that makes logical sense. Mm-hmm. Like, introduce yourself. Tell me the name of the podcast. If this is about a specific episode, name the guests. And then like just the briefest summary, truly the briefest summary. Like if you want to copy and paste what you have on, like the Apple thing, that's fine. And then sometimes I always call it like the brass tacks of it, because if I do decide I'm going to write about this, it's like, just put who the writer is, who the producer is, etc. at the bottom, like credits. So I just know, and I don't have to look around. Like that gets my attention, like a thoughtful email where I'm like, oh, you've considered what the person you want to listen to this might need to know if they do in fact listen, and then decide to write about it.
Yeah. I like the people that don't really bother with deadlines and things like that. So they will send in their suggestion for their show on the Wednesday, which is when we're preparing our reviews to go up on Thursday. And they have, hey, I got a great guest on the show this week.
That's really smart. Yes. If you're like listening to this and you want to send something in, like Monday's good.
Yeah. And I've actually, some of the people that I've actually written some of those people back, because either I'm familiar with their show or I know somebody who's involved in the production or something. And I'll say, hey, you know what? This is great, but you got to keep in mind, you got to send it in by Monday, and don't send us something every week. Make it special, you've got somebody on the show that's really cool, like somebody we've heard of, or they've done something interesting. But if you start peppering us every week, we will just nobody will pay attention to your email coming in.
Right. I also think it's fine. Yeah. Like send that one email and be like, more good stuff is coming. Feel free to subscribe, because I try to just subscribe to them so then I can keep an eye on it. Because that's a tough turnaround. Honestly, even sometimes if I get those on a Monday, it's just like, I don't know if this is happening for me this week. I've already done my searching.
Yeah. Because I'll oftentimes have listened to the episode that I'm going to review by the weekend.
Right.
And so by then it's like, well, I kind of like the episode that I'm doing. So I got to really like your episode if I'm going to bump this one in my mind space.
Very true.
Well, I don't want to hold you. I don't want to keep you. I know you're 3 hours ahead of me and it's evening there. But I'm so glad we got a chance to actually talk. And
this was really nice.
Yeah. And, I don't know if
huge party episode with everyone who writes for the column.
I would love to. I mean, I've actually sent a couple of emails to the group because we have this weird sort of group email-y thing that goes on when we're talking about who's doing what episode. And I've suggested that we get together for some kind of online meeting or something. Nobody's ever paid attention to it.
Well, that's so funny because if I have been doing this for 2 years, that means, did I read that email? And I was just like, whoop.
Maybe. I mean, we get used to the things we're supposed to be paying attention to and other stuff kind of slips through the cracks. But it would be great to, get a meeting of the minds together. Cause like right now we're all working on the year end thing and it's all been handled through email and Google Docs and which is fine. I mean, it's the way everybody works today, but it would be kind of cool to actually be able to see each other face to face and have a conversation about what we're interested in covering.
Very true. This is where I recommend to you and everybody listening the podcast Bananas.
Ah, yes.
The podcast brings me so much joy. I can't even say the name without laughing. It's a strange news podcast. It's great.
I am going to check it out. You've been a big proponent of it, and I will have to check it out. And people, please check out Becca's reviews. They're available at vulture.com. You do more than just This Week in Comedy podcasts. You've written a number of pieces.
I have. What do I have coming out of interest? I just did a article that I think, it's December, early December, so it'll come out this month. It was interviews with podcast producers about the hardest episode they've ever had to produce.
Oh, very cool.
And that was really, really fun. I talked to about 13 people, and the stories are varied and all especially interesting.
Excellent. Becca, thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Nice to meet you and see you. And let's keep in contact, shall we?
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.
This episode of Succotash is sponsored in part by TrumPoetry.com, a chronological ode to a fake muse. Enjoy a rhyming spin on the news of the day every day, as well as over 500 archived daily verses thoroughly covering the White House, America, and the world with a sticky caramel coating that's impossible to remove. That's TRUMPoetry.com. Everything you need to know in rhyming couplets. TrumPoetry.com.
Well, a big thank you to Becca James for dropping in and favoring us with that chat. You can catch her damn near every week along with me, reviewing comedy soundcasts on vulture.com for the column This Week in Comedy Podcasts. She has a lot of other articles up at Vulture, so check those out. You should also follow her on Twitter at ReckaFlames. That's WRECKAFLAMES. A play on her name, Becca James. That's at ReckaFlames, which you should do because she knows how to craft a clever tweet. Another big thank you to you, that's right, you, for stopping by, popping us in your ear holes, and enjoying the show. At least, I hope you enjoyed the show. If that is true, then why not keep those good feelings going all the way over to Apple Podcasts and give us a pile of stars and a tasty little review. Even a couple of lines will do quite nicely. Thank you. All right, I'm going to get out of here with a reminder that Tyson will be back here next week with Epi233. Then we're off for a few weeks for the holidays until just after New Year's. I will return with Epi235 on Tuesday, January 16th of 2021. Until then, I want to wish you and yours a wonderful holiday season with a reminder to stay safe, socially distance, wash your hands, and until you get that coronavirus vaccine in you, stop touching people. And you don't have to touch them to give them the gift of cheer this year, which is to simply pass the succotash.
You've been listening to Succotash Shut-In, the soundcast stimulus package, with your host, Marc Hershon. Brought to you by Henderson's Pants, from Poetry.com, and imagine your company's name right here. Find us on the web at Succotashshow.com, on iTunes, on Stitcher, on iHeart Radio, on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on the Laughable app, and tattooed on your mother's rear end. You can hear us streaming and like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Succotash Show. Email us at marc@succotashshow.com. Or call into the Succotash Skype line at our toll call number 818-921-7212. You can also upload clips from your favorite comedy soundcasts directly to us using our direct upload link at hightail.com/u/Succotash. Production of Succotash is overseen by Joe Paulino through the auspices of Studio P. Sausalito, the home of the hit. Our hosts are Marc Hershon and Tyson Saner. Our musical director is Scott Carvey. Our booth assistant is still Kenny Durgis. And until next time, I'm your loyal booth announcer, Bill Haywatt, reminding you to please wash your hands and pass the Succotash. Goodbye. This has been a Succotash Patch production.